watching NotesIn9.
Hello, and welcome to NotesIn9. I'm David Leedy. Episode 115, Data View Control Part 1, Implementation. If you cross the movie's dodgeball and bring it on, you get pitch perfect. Okay, just a quick note on the recent OpenNTF webinar that I participated on. I did a topic with my good friend, Marky Roden, and it was called Getting Started with XPages. And we spoke for about an hour, and we presented about an hour and a half's worth of material. So we didn't get to it all, and some of what we did get to, we did kind of rush through. So I apologize for that. We just crammed it all in there. But Nicholas has posted a blog on the OpenNTF blog, and he's got a link to the video on YouTube. And he's even broke out the audio. If you just want the audio recording of it, you can download that. And of course, the slides are there. Now, I do have plans to bring the demo section of that, a slower, more in-depth version of that demo, to NotesIn9 relatively soon. I've been doing a lot of traveling. I think I've got one more trip, and then hopefully I'll have time to get through my backlog of shows, and then I can get that out. So I do want to redo that demo more as a live build than what I was able to do in the webinar because of just the time allotment. Okay, so today Brad Balasatis comes back on the show, and Brad is a great developer from PSC Group, a consultancy that you're able to hire if you do have XPages needs. And he's part of a great XPages team. I'm probably going to forget some names, but Marky's there, Kathy Brown's there, Troy is there, Andrew Barrickman is there, and if I have forgotten your name, come on the show, and then I'll probably remember it better. So hint, hint. Okay, so but anyway, you got to check out Brad's blog, Accelerant.net. He's doing this epic series on the Dojo data grid. I think it's up to 20 parts now, and it's just, if you want to get into a data grid or so, go here and check this out and read this. Dojo comes built in. His partner in crime, Marky Roden, now he's also doing a series on a grid, I think from EXTJS project. So I don't think Marky's quite up to 20 parts because he's a slacker sometimes. No, just kidding, Marky. But so you have a choice of two different grids you can implement in your XPages applications. So feel free to check out either of those blog series. They really are brilliant. Today, Brad is going to talk about the data view control, which is I don't think there's been enough published about the data view control, and he calls this part 1, so I'm already looking forward to part 2. And the data view control is a very powerful control that's available through the extension library upgrade pack or Domino Designer 9. And while this demo that he's going to do is not mobile focused, it does have a mobile renderer built into the data view control. So if you're doing a mobile XPages project and you use the data view control, it will render as a mobile application should. So just keep that in mind. But he's going to tell us how to just get into it and start using it, a lot of what the options are, and just a good demo that should give you a good comfort zone in using the data view control. So with that being said, let's go to the demo.
Welcome to NotesIn9, the Data View Control Part 1, Implementation. My name is Brad Balasatis. I work on the XPages team at PSC Group. I blog about XPages at Accelerant.net, and you can also connect with me on Twitter and LinkedIn. In this episode, we're going to start to take a look at the data view control. The control's been a part of the extension library for a while, but now it's included in 853 Upgrade Pack 1, so it's even more easily accessible. It's used in the Team Room XL template, so you can see its use in a production application. The control's primarily designed around a single summary column, one piece of information that identifies the document clearly and then builds a UI around that. Although we're not going into mobile apps in this demo, this is the recommended control for displaying view data in a mobile application. This control has a lot of features. It's got a much more modern UI than the view panel, but at the same time it's still very easy to create. You drag and drop the control on the screen, and you set a bunch of properties. It handles categorization, it handles response hierarchies, it even lets you use icon columns. The biggest feature is the collapsible detail section, and we'll get into that. The control itself is highly customizable. There's a lot of facets in the design that allow you to really customize the look and feel based on how you'd like it. It's got more options for data sources than a standard view panel. You can actually pass it a collection of documents, more like a repeat control, as well as just connecting it to a view. As I had mentioned a moment ago, it's designed to work well in a full browser and on a mobile device. And it's also got some extra great features with the more rows pager, and even the ability to save the state of the view with the expand and collapse state on the screen. A couple minor drawbacks. It's definitely a little bit more complicated to create than a view panel, but definitely still very easy to get up and running. I definitely think that this control is not designed for many columns of tabular data like a grid or a standard view panel. This is a much different UI, so we'll see that, but I just wanted to make a point of that. Now here's what the control looks like in design mode. Once you drag and drop it onto a page, here's how it's laid out. Just kind of gives you an idea of the sections available and the things that you can do with it, and we'll take a look at those in more depth. And here's a sample view that we're going to build in this demo, just highlighting a lot of these features with categorization and icons and collapsible details. So let's go to the demo. Now we're starting here with a blank XPage. We're just going to drag and drop a data view control from the extension library section. It's a data view, and we can just drop it onto the page and select our source view. Now I'm going to be basing this as off of a very simple Notes client view that I have in the sample database. It just has a list of company documents. It's categorized. There's an icon column that really just displays the company number out of the name, and we'll show you how that works in a bit, and a few basic fields about the company. So that's what we're going to base this on. Now if I save this and preview it, we'll see that there's nothing displayed. So by default, there is nothing to show for a data view. As I had mentioned earlier, it's really based around the concept of the summary column. So let's start there. Now under the data view, when I have this selected, I'll go to all properties, collapse most of these, and most of the properties that we're going to work with are under this format section here under all properties. So the first thing we're going to do is come here and add a summary column. So I just click this plus button to add a summary column and type in the column name. In this case, my summary column is called company, and I just happen to know that. Definitely one of the drawbacks that makes this a little bit more work to create. Even though I've connected this to a view, I still have to manually type in the column names. And this really needs to map to the programmatic column name. So if I'm in the company's view, I bring up the properties, on this last tab here, this is where I find the name to use. Now, a lot of columns, if they just display a single field, the column name will be the same as the field, but in a column where you're computing a value, like this next icon here, you can see it just assigns a value of $2. So just an important note, when you're specifying columns for all of these properties in the data view, they need to match the programmatic column names. So now back to my view here. I've defined a summary column. So now let's take a look at what this looks like in the browser. Okay, so nothing fancy here, but we can see we've got a list of documents, and it automatically creates them as links to open the pages. I had this simple page already available, and it just returns to my data view. So defining a summary column, gave us something to work with. The next thing we're going to look at is the extra columns section. This is over here off to the right. This is where you can define additional columns to display in the view. So if I find the property here called extra columns, I can now click this plus icon and define an extra column to include. So I'm going to include the company location. I'm going to come back up here and add one more column for the date the company was founded. Now I can save this and preview it. And we can see this certainly doesn't look pretty, but we have our summary column and we have our extra columns. We can see that what it does with the extra columns is basically shoves them as far to the right on the screen as possible so that they take up the least amount of room. And now you can start to see why this control really does not work well with a lot of columns displayed. But again, obviously, off the bat, this UI is pretty bad to begin with. So we'll show you how you can improve that. The way to start to improve this is to define a theme for the application, or I should say the simplest way to do that. I'm just going to type in here, One UI v2.1, because that theme is already available on the server. And once I close this and then go to refresh the page, now I'm starting to get a much cleaner look for this. This control is designed to work well with One UI, so it's important to see that that's a good way to quickly get it to look a lot better. Now, even if you don't want to use One UI, the good news is all of these column properties, they have style, style class, and header style class properties available, so that you really can highly customize this even if you don't want to use One UI. Okay, next thing I'd like to take a look at showing you here is how we can use column titles. Now, if you want to show column titles in your control, first of all, we have to start with the column titles property of the data view control and set that to true. And then we need to manually type in the column titles for each column. Again, a little bit more work than, say, a view panel dragging and dropping, but still not very complicated. So I typed in some column names and I enabled the columns. And now let's take a look. And we can see it put those column titles over every column in the view. I'm definitely not a big fan of this look, but at least wanted to demonstrate that this is possible. In my opinion, I don't think it makes sense to really have this column title over the summary column, but it probably makes more sense for the extra columns displaying off to the side so that it's clear what they're displaying. So again, so far this is nothing fancy, nothing that you can't do easily with a standard view panel or repeat control. Let's take a look at a few more things that this control can do pretty easily for you. One thing it can do well is categorization. So this is definitely a big advantage of the data view over something like a repeat control, because it makes it very easy to add your own categories. So we just go to the category column property. I click the plus icon to add one, and now I just type in the column name. I just happen to know that that category column is named $1. And just to show you, I'm typing in a title over the category column. And now let's take a look. We can see now we've got categorization in this view. Okay, and it's servicing the category column, but the title that I defined isn't displaying anywhere, which makes sense. I'm not really sure why they gave you a property to define a title for a category column, but it's not going to display regardless. So now we can see that I've easily added categorization to this view. And the good news is you can add multiple levels of categorization, so that's definitely one thing that this does well. Next thing we'll take a look at is displaying an icon column. So you can see here we have this property called icon column. And now we define the column from the view that it's going to get its data from. Okay, now it's important to note that this icon column is not what we think about it in the Notes client. You can't define a Notes icon column in a client-side view and have it surface exactly the same way, in the browser. You really kind of have to set up the icon column mapping yourself, but I'll show you how to do that. So as I had mentioned before, in my underlying view, this column that I'm using for an icon really just displays a single number. There's nothing else special about it, but that's important to know so that I can make these icons work. So under the icon column section here, I'm just going to click the plus to add an icon. And under URL, I can just open this folder and select an icon resource that I already have in my application here. Now I'm also going to set the selected value to 1 for this icon. Now what that tells it is that if the column underneath has a value of 1, display this icon. Okay, so I'm just going to go in here and set these up for each of the icons that I have in the system. It's definitely a little bit time consuming. As I had mentioned, you have to create these mappings yourself. So we want to be setting the selected value property to manually map the values. That was a mistake. The selected property you can use to compute your own formula for whether the icon should be displayed. So again, for hard-coded values, we're using selected value. Okay, so now I've defined 5 potential icons and mapped them each to values that would cause them to be displayed. So we'll save this and preview it. And now we've got icons displaying here. And it looks like I made one mistake with mapping icon number 2. Yep. So the selected value was incorrect. There was nothing for it to match, so it didn't have anything to display. Okay, so it was that easy to add an icon column. Again, a little bit of work to define the icons and map them, but it's nice that it gives you the opportunity to do that if you'd like to. Some other things that this control does pretty well for you. It actually, with built-in functionality, can handle response documents, and it will indent them nicely. It also, if you look at the design here, gives you 6 different places where you can drop a pager in to add paging to the control. So that's as simple as getting a pager control and just dropping it into one of these facets. And all you have to do is define the for name. Which I believe is data view 1. Yes, it is. And now we've got a pager, in our view control. So all of this is well and good, but this is still pretty simplistic for what we're looking at here. This looks a lot like a regular view or something you could easily create with a repeat control. But the real power of this control is here in this detail section. You have the ability here to customize the content that's displayed, and this control gives you the ability to expand and collapse it so that you can put a lot more information in here, but not clutter the view up unless the user wants to see it. So the first thing we're going to do here is I'm just going to drag a computed field right into this detail section, and I'm going to set its value with JavaScript to, there we go. I'm basically going to be reading a column value out of the underlying view, and it's a description column which has longer text in it, so we'll see how well this control manages it. Now I'm using row handle as an object to get a handle to the view entry. So on my data view control, I need to define that variable. And that gives me the ability to refer to the view entry to read a column value off of it. So now let's take a look at this. Okay, and we can see that it didn't show much of anything. This is because I haven't told the view yet that it's going to have a collapsible detail section. So if we go back to the design here, there's this property called collapsible detail. Once we set this to true, we can preview, and you can see off to the right here, it added this little icon. It says to show details. So now once I expand that, I see the detail section. I can click the icon again to collapse it. So this was a good way to manage this long amount of text that I wanted to display, this full, company description, but without having to have it clutter every entry in the view. One thing that's interesting to note about the expanding and collapsing is that there's another property that you can set called Details on Client that lets you define whether all of these detail sections are preloaded. Now, if they're not, and by default they're not, every time you click on that expand collapse icon, it does a partial refresh, so it hits the server and it loads the information. So it's up to you whether you want the trade-off of faster response time for expanding the sections, or whether you want the faster initial load time and let the user deal with a little bit more of a delay to expand and collapse the sections. So now we've got a quick overview of the data view control, and we've seen how to surface it and make use of a lot of the key facets. Tune in next time where we will take a look at how to customize a lot of these options on the data view control. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you then.
And that's the demo. I really thank Brad for coming on, and I look forward to seeing him again. And if you have any questions for me, here's my contact information, and I thank you for your time.